I am no longer going to be adding to my contribution to the dad side of this podcast, meaning my kids are fine, but there will be no future kids. I did the initial consultation for, as Ben so eloquently put it in emoji form, two scissors, getting snipped. So, what are your feelings on that? Have you guys had that conversation with you and your wife?
But I don't think we have as much as far as like competition because they both don't like to do the same things. Like Avery, she gets home from school, all she wants to do is like art. James would rather run around and play basketball, play with his trucks. So like I think we don't see it because there's a lack of similar interests.
Welcome to the Advisor Dads podcast, where family, finance, and real life collide. We're two financial advisors and full time dads sharing stories, lessons, and strategies to help you make smarter decisions for your family and your future. Whether you're navigating retirement, raising kids, or just trying to make sense of the financial world, we've got you covered. Ben Tusky is a private wealth advisor and the vice president of financial planning at Sunpoint Investments. Dave Rath is a wealth advisor and the chief investment officer at Continuum Wealth Advisors. The views shared in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of Sunpoint Investments or Continuum Wealth Advisors. Seriously, don't make financial decisions just because two dads with a microphone sound convincing. Talk to a professional that knows your situation. Some securities or strategies discussed may be holdings or recommendations for clients of Sunpoint Investments or Continuum Wealth Advisors. All right, let's get into it.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Advisor Dads, where you come for the personal finance and you stay for the dad jokes. I'm David Rath and I'm here with my co-host Ben Tusky. Tusky, I always say it wrong. Ben, how's it going?
It's going well. Again, like I said before, I'm never going to correct you. I usually don't correct anybody. How are you doing? Not fresh back from Brazil, but a week removed fresh back from Brazil.
A
How was
week
the trip?
removed, and I am happy to report that there were no travel issues, which is a
Wow.
rarity for us. And the vacation was great because the kids are 4 and 6, and now it is to the point where vacations are kind of relaxing. Like, we're not worried about them running away or drowning. We were in a section of the beach where it was a bay, and so there's not undertow, not big waves. So we just kind of chilled in the sand while they played in the water. So it was kind of relaxing.
Can they both swim?
So that's a topic for another day because kind of like my oldest, he can swim. He's been taking swim lessons for over 2 years right now, but it's 30 minutes a week. It's expensive, and
Yep.
we've spent probably over $3,000 to $4,000 on swim lessons, and I don't fully trust him in the water. So I have a pet theory that the school is purposefully holding him back just so that we stay on their payroll. Part of it probably has to do with the fact that they are just young and learning their bodies and
Yep.
muscle movements and things like that. But yeah, we pay a decent amount for swim lessons, and we haven't seen the results that at least I would want.
I feel like that's like pretty common. I just feel like most people like our kids can't swim, and I think it's one of those things that bothers my wife because she was a swim instructor on the swim team. Like I'm not, she always like tells people that like I'm not a good swimmer. Like I can swim.
Yeah.
It's just not something that I excel in, and I'm not like because of asthma, I think my whole life, I'm not great at holding my breath. So, but same thing. We've spent so much money. Like we did like the goldfish swim school. We
That's
started
what we're
Avery in
doing.
that.
We're doing goldfish, yeah.
It is really expensive for 30 minutes a week. It's also like so inconvenient because it's like in the middle of the week. I feel like anything in the middle of the week now is just kind of inconvenient, but it was like I don't know, $130 a month for her. We started her at like 15 months old or something like that, just to get acquainted with the water and you're doing all this stuff. And I don't feel like it did anything because we didn't do it for James. And I feel like they were at the exact same point when they were both 4 years old. And then we did this other swim program for Avery through Episcopal Academy, which for anybody in like the Philadelphia area knows Episcopal Academy. It's like one of the most prestigious schools, not for swimming, just for education, academics. But yeah, that was a fortune too, and
Well,
nothing happened.
I'm gonna forward this conversation to my wife
Yeah.
because I've commented on it before, and she's like, it takes time, and we weren't planning on talking about this at all, but I need to mention it. So there is, you may have seen like videos floating out there about like it's like an intense way to get your infants like accustomed to water, where you just basically have somebody throw them in the water
Yep.
and let them sink or swim. I don't know how it works, and actually talked to a guy who did that. That also is pretty expensive, but he said his kids have been swimming since they were 1.5 years old because they just went through like this crazy Bear Grylls style like survival tactic in their pool. And I was laughing because we did sleep training for our kid. I don't know if you guys did anything similar,
Yeah.
but if you let your kid cry it out and let them self-soothe in their bed, I had to physically restrain my wife from going into the room to stop them from crying because that's how it works. I can't even imagine what I'd have to do if they're just like drowning in the pool and there's a guy there saying, "No, don't worry, it's
No,
okay."
no, no. That's the thing I said to my wife because I've seen it before, and I'd be like, we just would you wouldn't be able to be there. Like you would have to be in a different room and just fully trust that like they're not going to let anything happen. I've seen it and I've heard the results are incredible. So we're doing this. We pulled them from swim programs. We're paying for this 2 week, pretty expensive. It's every day for 2 weeks, and it's that similar style where they like essentially are forcing you to swim, and we'll see what happens. It's like
It's like
45 minutes every day.
Navy SEALs buds training for kids.
Yeah, I guess so. But those programs are at it's at like a college, and the success rate apparently is pretty high. And I don't, that's I guess what we're paying for at this point.
This
I'll
might be a
be
dumb
able to report
question,
back.
but what's the failure? Like, what are those cases?
I,
Hopefully not the
they're
worst,
not here anymore. They're
right?
not here anymore, I guess. I have no idea. I guess you sign up for another session or something like that. Like I I don't know, but I know my wife's tired of like lugging the swimmies and stuff to the pool, and James is now at our local pool. You have like the kiddie pool that's like a foot deep, and then you go right to like another pool that's maybe like 3 foot down to 5 feet. And now that they're, Avery will be 6 by the summer, it's going to be in that weird age where like they should just be in that kind of medium pool. But I know it's pretty stressful when you have two kids that like can't swim. So trying to correct that.
Yeah. Well, as I said, we weren't planning on talking about swimming, but kind of came naturally based on the discussion. So, what we're going to talk about today is go through some of my recent trials and tribulations and how it relates to not being a dad anymore. There's nothing serious, just we'll talk about it. And then we're also going to talk about how do we stop our kids from being in constant competition. This is, as I said, this is going to be me just leaning on you because I have not figured that out yet. And then we'll go into on the other side of the spectrum, which is talking about elder care and how to, how being a child or a son or a daughter yourself and dealing with some aging parents. So I guess I'll kick it off and talk about as I texted Ben earlier this week, I am no longer going to be adding to my contribution to the dad side of this podcast, meaning my kids are fine, but there will be no future kids. I did the initial consultation for, as Ben so eloquently put it in emoji form, two scissors, getting snipped. So, what are your feelings on that? Have you guys had that conversation with you and your wife?
So I had that procedure a while ago. So James was born on January 27th of 21. I like it was such a weird time in my life. I think I took the series 24 on February 8th, and on February 10th I was in my procedure. Like it was a really wild 8 days, but we knew after two, and I didn't want to jinx it and get it done before we had James. So we waited till after, but I had already done the consult, and it was during COVID, so like things were just a little bit different. Everything was done virtually, and obviously then you have to go in there. They're not doing anything like that virtually. Nobody's coming out to your house, so you still have to go into a
No
to a
like drone
hospital.
robots coming into your house.
Yeah, just to do the procedure. But yeah, we were we were done at 2, and there's just like a lot of factors. I'm one of 4, she's one of 2. Like it would have been cool to have maybe more kids. I don't know how financially we would have made it happen, and I don't know. I just saw a lot like the chaos that we grew up in. I I just have there's other things that I want to be able to do. Like I really like you guys just went to Brazil. Like I would love to be able to do those trips with my kids. But when you have 3, 4, 5, it just makes it really challenging from just a logistical standpoint of how do you have enough hands to make it happen. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm I'm done. Do you have a date yet?
April 2nd.
Oh,
So
a
the
couple weeks.
lady at the front office at the front desk, she said, "Well, we have some availability next week." I was like, "Hold on,
Whoa.
let me compose myself." My wife asked me if I was nervous, and I was like, "I don't know if I'm nervous. It's just a weird sensation." Like, were you like extremely nervous going into it?
I think when you're like once you get there, you're like I didn't think too much about it, but we had a newborn, so like there wasn't a lot of time to think about anything else. But yeah, once you're there, I guess the big question is, are you being put under or are you doing it at a doctor's office?
He said local anesthesia, so I think that you
Okay.
do have the option. I think I'll just go with the local anesthesia. And
Yeah.
part of my apprehension has to do with a experience that my friend had where without giving too much away, it was not the best procedure and he was in a lot of pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hearing that experience, I'm like, I don't want to do with that. Obviously, it's not going to be a fun procedure anyway, but definitely not like a mishap that I want to have happen. So a little bit
Um,
nervous.
yeah, I did the local anesthesia and I'll never forget like waiting in like the Bay Area like of that area of the hospital. There was a guy in his like mid 40s across from me and we're chatting it up about like yeah, we're having this. We kept calling it a surgery and the nurse like poked her head in. She was like, "I just need to clarify something with you guys. It's not a surgery. This is a procedure and it's very minor." And we looked at each other like, "Have you had this done before?" She was like, "Obviously not." It's like, "All right, then shut up."
Yeah.
Like my wife was like, "This is the most minor thing," and I was like, it's just because of where it's happening,
Yeah.
it's major to us.
And this is
So
funny. I was in the waiting room waiting to be seen, and my wife randomly texts me. She says, "Something's going on outside our house. All the birds are going crazy, chasing each other." And I said, "If there's not a better contrast for the situation that I'm in right now, I don't know if I don't know what it is." Because like those birds are out there procreating and I am ending my time. So I was like, good timing on that.
well, not to jinx anything, but like technically, there's a lot of samples out there that it's not 100%.
Mm.
So
Well,
there's always that.
hopefully I like to play
Hopefully it is.
I like to play probabilities, and I feel pretty comfortable with what
with
we're getting into.
with 99 on 99 and some decimals after that.
Yeah, yeah,
I think you'll be safe. All right, well, that's a dad of the week right there.
yeah. So talking about our current kids instead of the lack of future kids now, this is something that, as I said, we might be leaning on you for advice because we haven't figured out the solution. Our kids are constantly at each other's throats and they're always comparing they're always comparing themselves to the other one and it could be anything. And a great example of this would be, so for Valentine's Day, my dad got them cards with scratch off tickets. Dad, thanks for starting the gambling habit young. Because
I did want to say that, but
so they start scratching off, and Daniel, my older one, he gets another free ticket. So
oh,
great, he's
jeez.
already hooked. And when Michael, my younger one, he sees that he got a free one, he starts crying and complaining that Daniel got a free ticket. Well, Michael scratches his off and he gets $40. I'm like, wow.
Whoa.
So now Daniel's mad that he got $40. Michael is still mad that his brother got a free ticket, and now Daniel's mad that his younger brother got money. And I'm like, guys, stop. And this is just such a microcosm of everything. And we can't even praise one without the other one saying, oh, well, that means that I'm the opposite of this. And so
Mm.
would like to hear your experience and how you approach that. And we can talk through like some of the things that we've tried so far unsuccessfully.
Yeah, I feel like when the things that we've tried is like to like always try to balance things out. But my wife and I do have this like pretty strict like we're not gonna lie about like I don't know, James, we've up until this week has had some like really tough days at school. His class is just very chaotic, and I'm not saying that he's not part of the problem because there's plenty of days where he is. But then like Avery comes home from school, we have like a great report, or she does something at school. Like we just had parent teacher conferences. She's a girl and loves school. It's the easiest parent teacher conference ever. We turn to like praise her and her behavior and everything like that. And James definitely stands there and looks of like, am I next? And then it's like we try to like be pretty clear, like, hey, like that's Avery just had her parent teacher conference. We just got a great report. We haven't had a report from your teacher, so like we'll find out when we have that day. And I feel like there's plenty of times though that like we're just like trying to balance the hey, you're both doing great and things like that. But I don't think we have as much as far as like competition because they both don't like to do the same things. Like Avery, she gets home from school, all she wants to do is like art. She's gonna sit at we have like she's got a little arts and crafts table, this thing that's like stocked next to it. That's all we try to do is like keep it full of like paper, crayons, markers. She would sit there from the minute she gets home till dinner, unless it's really nice outside to play outside, and do that. James would rather run around and play basketball, play with his trucks. So like I think we don't see it because there's a lack of similar interests. And but if we had that scratch off scenario, yeah, we would have probably had the same thing. Like if somebody won something and the other one didn't, obviously that's kind of crazy that Michael won $40 on a scratch off. That's incredible. But I don't know if James would have connected it. Like if he would have been like he just doesn't care about a lot of things unless it's sports.
Yeah. You're teaching him well.
I, am I? I don't know. I think
Sports
it's
are the
just
only thing
like
that matters, my son.
I don't know. It's just like, and we want him to care about other things. It's just that's been the struggle is getting him to care about other things the way that he cares about like running around and playing basketball and stuff like that. So
I think maybe some of it is the gender thing too. Like you
yeah,
said, the different interests, but also not butting heads all the time as like in a quest for whoever the favorite son is.
yeah,
And Monique is reading a book right now called Siblings Without Rivalry, which again is going down that path of helping us, but sometimes the techniques just don't really hit home. And one of them
yeah,
that they always talk about is you praise the effort, not the result. So
yep,
if they come home with a good grade on a test or whatever they do these days, just say this is because you worked really hard.
yeah,
You must be proud of yourself. So rather than saying, "Hey, we are really proud of you," you flip it around and say, "You must be proud of yourself." And it sometimes it works. Sometimes Michael still finds a way to feel slighted, and
yeah,
he's got a lot of the little brother syndrome, where he's always in competition because he's trying to get to that level. So he's trying to do stuff that his older brother can do, like adding and very basic multiplication. And I'm like, dude, you're 4 years old. You're not
yeah,
supposed to know this stuff. Like
yeah.
Daniel didn't know it when he was 4, but of course you can't really reason with an upset 4-year-old.
Right. Yeah, I think that books are and what you guys are doing already. Like, hey, you're just trying to throw a bunch of stuff at a wall and like, hey, let's just see what's going to work for Michael and Daniel. Because like there's like what's happens for us doesn't work for you, and what works for you doesn't work for somebody else. But I think the best thing that you can do is just like try different things out. And school just started doing this with James. He had like 3 weeks where I was like nervous to pick him up because I was waiting for the look from the teacher of like the one day, oh man, she was like, I need to talk to you like after all the parents pick up their kids. And I was like, damn it. I looked at James, I was like, dude, you are dead. And he was just like really bad, like not listening to her, teasing the assistant teacher. That was when I got like really frustrated. But they implemented this new red, yellow, green chart at school. So when, if you're trending downwards, she starts to, hey, listen, this is the last thing I'm going to tell you. And then like, I'm going to move you to yellow on the chart. He is like fixated on this chart, which is like kind of against what you just said. Like he's focused so much on this result and this status of being green, and he's freaking 4. But his behavior's never been better. All this week, he's been on the green. We got notes home, like how good his decision making was, how helpful he was with his friends, his listening. And I had said to Mary Kate, I'm like, is that like this is the result we want? Is this is She was like, I just think we got to stay out of their way.
Yeah.
Like just and I was like, well then do we replicate it and put a little red, yellow, green chart at home? And she was like, nah, like we need him to just keep being good at school. What he does at home we can handle.
Yeah.
Like and it just feels like as parents we're always in this constant like loop of decision making of like testing theories out of what's going to work and what doesn't work. And when something does work, then it doesn't work a week later.
The process of being a parent is so much about those feedback loops, and they joke that there's not a handbook for kids. Like, it's so true. You just figure out whatever works for you and your situation and go with it.
Yeah.
If it works, then go. As long as you're not, as we've talked about before, as long as you're not feeding your kid ice cream every meal, I would say that's the bar that you need to clear. But whatever works for you and your family and where you're trying to push them to develop and to grow into. So the other side of the spectrum, as we talked about, is as you're very helpfully wearing a vest for wealth.com, who we have access to as well. I have not gotten a vest from that company. I'm going to have to contact our rep about that. But wealth.com, just for everybody's sake, we're not being paid for any of this, but it is a way for us to offer estate planning documents to our clients, and also some other helpful tools to help them in the planning process, both for themselves and if they want to include their elder parents as a part of the process. So you had a situation this last week where you're dealing with a sticky situation of that point in time where it would have helped more to have a bit more in place, right?
Yeah, I mean, and this is like I would say pretty common in our industry, whether it's estate planning, whether it's retirement planning, whether it's tax planning, being a couple steps ahead, and by a couple steps ahead, being a couple years ahead is always better than being a couple years behind. And in estate planning, the situation that I'm still working through is grandma's in a long-term care facility now. She was in a rehab facility, but owns a home. The home's not in a trust. There's a situation with the son and daughter. Beneficiaries aren't up to date. She has dementia slash Alzheimer's. So like there's POA, power of attorneys set up, which is really helpful. There's just a couple of things that had we done it a year ago, we would be in a different position today. And some of it is strictly estate planning, but there's always those kind of like trickle down or ripple effects of the estate planning. And the one that we're really working through is about 60% of the assets are tied up in annuities. And annuities are not a bad thing. They're a tool at the end of the day, and they could be an excellent tool for the right person. They could be a horrible tool for the wrong person. But because we don't have access to the information on these annuities, we don't know what decisions need to be made. And now, if anybody has dealt with care facilities before and not being on Medicaid, it's thousands of dollars a month. I think this one's probably between $7,000 and $8,000 a month. Well, you need access to capital to be able to pay for that. So navigating that while trying to get grandma into the right care facility creates this just like mountain of challenges that, you know, you have, look at us, Dave and I, you have kids that you're trying to do everything that we just talked about. Dave's trying to go get a procedure done, and now he's got to figure out what annuity is at what insurance company, and how does he annuitize it? What's the surrender? Like all of this stuff that you need to know. How are you going to be able to pay for this care facility and for how long while finding the best care facility for grandma? It's a lot for any family, and I love being able to help do it, but I can see and you can hear the stress on and in the family's voices, and that's it's tough, and that's the part of planning ahead that we're trying to do with other clients. This is a brand new client, so like we never would have had this opportunity a year ago, but that's where our friends at wealth.com could have helped us, I guess twofold: create the documents. That's always super important, but I'd say the most important is actually the education that comes along with it. You create the documents of like, okay, who are the important people? How are they going to get access to this money? How are they going to know your wishes in the event that you're in a care facility for an extended period of time or you're incapacitated? Things like that. They're not fun conversations, but really make life easier for your family in the, you know, when the time does come and this does happen.
So two things. First, the idea of estate planning, most people assume it's when you die.
Right.
And this is why a lot of young people just say, I'll push it off till later because it's not going to happen anytime soon. But this type of stuff is while the person is still alive, and there is things that you can do to, as you said, make it easier for those people who are in charge of taking care of you. So they do have powers of attorney. That's a good starting point. And you mentioned if they were a client of yours a year ago, there would have been certain things. Would you be able to share like an example of something that would have made this process easier? You have a magic wand, you go back in time for a year to help these clients out.
Yeah, the probably the first thing I would have done is updated beneficiaries. Just the daughter is the sole beneficiary, and many times people think that I'll just receive the money, I'll split it with my brother. Like it doesn't happen like that because we're talking about commingling retirement accounts, a house, taxable accounts. They all have different tax treatments, and you can't just give money away. You can under certain thresholds, but if you're talking about $1 million, IRS is going to be involved. So you're going to have to work with a CPA to do that correctly. So it's just not as easy as people like to think it is. So that's the first thing I would have done, and that is usually the lowest hurdle because it doesn't require any documents. It just requires you to go to wherever your 401k is, your retirement account, your life insurance policy. It just requires you to log on and update the beneficiary and the percentages. So that's what I would have started with. The second thing I would have done was either engage like a wealth.com or an attorney maybe that they've already worked with to complete all of the rest of the documents, potentially setting up a trust as well for the home to go into. Because the other thing that they consulted me about was, what if mom buys the home from grandma for a heavily discounted value? This is the other thing that we often run into. When we want to do sales heavily below market value, again, the IRS steps in and says that's considered a gift. The amount below market value is a gift. Okay, if grandma's going to need access to that money at some point in the future, is there a way for us to have a contingent sale set up, or if the home, like if we could set this up or put the right documents in place, which the POA can handle, the power of attorney, but making sure that there's education for the other parties involved. Those are the two things, education, I think, and updating beneficiaries. That would have been if I could have went back a year. And I guess maybe the third thing is making sure that we all understand what the investments are. Because not even I just see the annuities on a statement. There's no information there. So having grandma, reach out to the advisor and collecting all of the information on the annuities to make informed decisions, because maybe keeping them is the best thing. I can't answer that question until we have the information.
It's tough for you to be flying blind and trying to do the best with what you have. And to plug our my company's podcast. We we just recorded something that went out last week that with your former colleague, my current colleague, our director of financial planning, where we talked about this exact thing. And the number one thing that we said that people can do is have a systematic process in place for reviewing beneficiaries, reviewing this kind of stuff. It doesn't take that long, but it's so easy to push to the back burner. And having a financial professional to guide you along that process, having some technology like wealth.com to visualize the estate plan, to do all of the things that years ago you had to go to an attorney's office, you had to do all the things, and we're trying to eliminate some of those hurdles. And somehow this turned into a commercial for wealth.com. So if any royalties want to send it our way, maybe a Patagonia vest, I'll accept that too. But it's again something that we want to offer to our clients so that these situations don't arise, because it's so not easy, but it is easier to prevent by doing a bit of planning. And then when the situation does arise, the burden that is being placed on the second, third generations is much less than it would have been otherwise.
I think that's how we talk about it with clients is nobody wants to plan their own death. Like nobody wants to think about that. Nobody wants to think about being incapacitated. I mean, when you go through your estate plan, you're answering some really uncomfortable questions. Like, do you want food and water if you're incapacitated? If you're hooked up to a ventilator? Like what? Like who wants to answer that question? Nobody, obviously. But if you don't answer it, what you're doing is forcing another family member to make that decision on your behalf when they probably don't know what you want. That is just the most unfair situation. And anybody that's lived through that, that's typically where we see the most action. Somebody that's like, oh, I did this with my mom. My kids are not dealing with this. And they want to move really quickly. And Wealth.com is spectacular for going and evaluating this stuff and creating these documents. There's, of course, always scenarios where you can't use Wealth.com if you have a taxable estate that's too large, over the $13 million mark for a single filer, or over 26 million for a joint filer, or anybody with a disability that potentially needs to be on like any type of state benefits or anything like that. It's usually really helpful to go to a local attorney to draft some of those documents. So there's resources out there, and having a professional to hold your hand through the process can be definitely situation changing.
Yeah. So I would say like the big takeaways from that part of the discussion is just first talk to somebody who can help you organize everything, and then start to go through the process of getting those documents in place, making sure they align with your desires. And you can do it on your own. Just like investing, you can do it on your own, but probably you want somebody who's experienced in this to help you through the process so that you're not surprising any members of your family with some undesirable situations.
I think having, obviously, Dave and I are a bit biased because we're both advisors here, but having somebody to just kind of objectively pulse check what you're deciding, who you're leaving the money to, what the implications are going to be, who you're leaving what asset to, how you're making decisions, filling out guardianship, understanding who the guardian might be and who the trustee of the trust might be, and how to think about it. Obviously, we're not attorneys, we're not going to give you advice on who to choose, but we can certainly educate you on things to think about. So when you and your husband, husband and wife go back behind closed doors and have the conversation, you're doing it with an educated perspective. So I think those are, yeah, you're spot on because there's a lot of things that you're trying to avoid.
Good. Well, I think that's a good place to stop for today. And I'll do the classic podcast YouTube thing where if you are enjoying what we're doing here, let us know. So make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, do whatever the kids tell you to do these days when they're on the channels. So we like doing this. We like just talking about our experience as dads and our professional experience and how they intertwine. So if you are enjoying it, let us know, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.